we're going to think about reading maps. Now we know that the Earth is round. We're very lucky today because sometimes we can look at maps on using Google Earth, which use satellites in the sky. Sometimes we might use a globe. A globe is a sphere shape to represent the Earth being round too. But sometimes we read a map which is on paper. It's a bit flatter and a bit easier to carry around. Sometimes you might use a book of maps called an atlas. They all have some very important things in common, which we're going to look at today. You might already know that the countries of the world are organised into different groups or sections. We call these continents. Can you spot them on the map? North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and Antarctica. Do you know which continent we live in? You're right, we live in Europe. Have you visited any other continents? Can you spot them on the map? You might be wondering what the other lines are on the map. Let's have a look at these. These lines are called lines of latitude and longitude. They're imaginary lines drawn on the Earth to help us locate places. They're not really drawn there. Lines of latitude run from east to west. They are measured in degrees and each line is the same distance apart. The equator is a line of latitude that runs around the middle of the Earth at 0 degrees. It is very hot near the equator. Anything above the equator is known as the northern hemisphere. This is because it's in the north. And anything below the equator is called the southern hemisphere because it's in the south. Another important line of latitude is the Tropic of Cancer, which sits at 23.5 degrees north of the equator. Equally, the Tropic of Capricorn sits at 23.5 degrees south of the equator. The space between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer is called the tropics. There are also a number of lines of longitude which travel from north to south around the globe or the map. One important line of longitude is known as the prime meridian, which sits at 0 degrees and runs through London. It is also known as the Greenwich Meridian because it runs through Greenwich in London. We use this for things like setting our clocks, which is why we call it Greenwich Mean Time. Can you recognise some of the lines of longitude and latitude on this map now? You can use them when you're describing where the countries are. You might say, I live in Europe. I live north of the equator. Here is a map of just Europe. Can you spot any other countries which are in Europe? If they're above the equator, would they be in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? You're right, the northern hemisphere. We've been studying Egypt recently. That's in a different continent. It's in Africa. Let's have a look at a map of Africa. Can you spot Egypt? Which country is south of Egypt? You're right, it's Sudan. Which ocean is to the north of Egypt? You're right, it's the Mediterranean Sea. Why not have some fun looking at some maps at home? What interesting facts can you find out about countries in the northern and southern hemisphere? You don't need to buy an atlas. You can always log on to Google Earth for free. Have fun!